Well, Robert Smith, General Secretary of the Boxing Board of Control, thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful winter Saturday. First of all, how is British boxing and the world of boxing shaping up for 2023?
Very good. I think that you look at the fights coming up, everybody moans about fights can't be made, but you look at the fights coming up over the next few months is great. We had a really good year with regard to shows, obviously a few disputes along the way, but with regard to shows and contests last year. But this year looks really good, so I'm really pleased.
Obviously, we have Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith tonight. There was a statement issued by the Boxing Board of Control yesterday from yourself, obviously, that there is a conduct hearing for Chris Eubank Jr. and, well, I wonder who that is. Could be Don King, Bob Arum, Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn. There's a conduct hearing over what the two men, Eubank and Smith, said to each other at the press conference on Wednesday. I'm using the expression homophobic slurs and accusations of cheating one way and the other. What's your take on what the two men were saying to each other on Saturday night, and how will that be viewed on Thursday night? How will that be viewed by the stewards when they sit down?
Well, I think that the comments were unacceptable in any walk of life, not just in boxing. And obviously, we put something out very quickly yesterday, and we will deal with it as soon as we can. Just want to get the contest out of the way. They behaved themselves reasonably well yesterday, so we'll take it all on board and see what's said. Let's see what they say. But I think, and you know as well as I do, Gareth, it's very difficult when these press conferences. The promoters wanted to say this and say that, so we'll have to speak to the promoter as well, which I've briefly spoken to. But no, you know, it was not the right thing to say, and therefore we've got to deal with it.
But how can kind of trying to reveal someone's sexuality be an insult anymore? You know, we're not in that world, are we? I mean, that's what's kind of inexplicable about this, and that boxers and anyone needs educating on this. We had it last February with Amir Khan and Kell Brook to a certain extent. Do you recall?
Yeah, I do. Yes, yeah.
What was done about that? Were they reprimanded? Were they fined?
Well, I think on those two, both boys are retired now, so there's not much you can do with them now. So, but obviously, I don't think on those occasions, in my own opinion, was quite as severe as it was on Thursday. But you know, we're living in a society now where things have changed since you and I were younger. Things were said to us at school or whatever, and it's not acceptable now. And therefore, we have to make sure that we try to keep everybody on board. I apologised on Sky TV yesterday for the comments made. They've apologised to me. However, that's not really the point because it's happened. And therefore, we have to deal, you know, speculation is a great thing, but let's just see how we deal with it next week or the week after.
But you know, but if nothing's done, and people aren't fined for that kind of thing, it will continue. I mean, clearly, a line needs to be drawn about thinking that is an insult, frankly.
Gareth, I can assure you something will be done.
Okay. I've written a column in the Telegraph today, and I wanted to ask your opinion on it. I was at the Misfits event. Obviously, it's broadcast on DAZN, KSI versus FaZe Temple last week, and a host of influencers and rap stars and DJs and all these guys, ostensibly in a boxing event. It's not real boxing, we know that. But it's quite influential. It did 300,000 buys, I was told. My sources revealed to me on DAZN. 10,000 fans in the arena were there from 7 in the evening till around 11. They didn't really leave till it was all over. What's the board? It wasn't licensed by the board, but what's your take on these growing events? KSI has signed a deal with DAZN, 30 events over the next 5 years, and I think 10 of them will be pay-per-view. What's the board's take on it? Would you sanction those kind of events if they came to you?
Well, I think it needs a discussion with the people who organise these things. Obviously, it's very, very popular. The thing that does concern me is, although it's not licensed by the board, it is boxing. So if somebody gets injured, I'll get the first phone call, and I want to make sure that everything's in place. So I'd like to have a conversation with the people organising these things to see if we can help them, bring them on board. Maybe they should go with the amateurs, etc. But that's just my personal opinion. That's not the board. That's not something I've discussed with the board. But I think it needs to be looked at. Boxing at the present time, whether you like it or not, is a kind of a wrong term, but it's a sexy environment at the moment. Everybody wants to be part of it because we've got some great stars. And boxing in Great Britain at the moment is very popular. So therefore, I think we need to look at it. But I'd like to talk to the people who's organising it as well.
But do we have to have do you think we have to have clear defined lines between what is entertainment as these guys going in the ring, and until they get in the ring, till they actually box, it looks like boxing, but they're not real boxers. Very few of them are anyway, with the exception perhaps of a couple of them who are really advancing, like Jake Paul, who's trying to become a real boxer. We know, well, we hear he's fighting Tommy Fury on February 25th. I'm not sure whether that's an influencer fight or a true boxing fight. We don't, it's kind of blurring the lines. But do we, because there's a lot of purists enraged by this, that boxing might be seen as being hijacked because it has narrative and theatre around it, and people love to see these people who are hugely followed by their subscribers testing themselves in what is a fight. Do we have to be? Should we be on? I went because it was on Talk Sports. I'm involved in looking at it. We do interviews. Holly Willoughby, Louis Theroux with their children at ringside. Do we have to be very careful how we police this? If we can,
absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, boxing is boxing. That's a boxing match, and therefore we have to look about how we can make sure it's as safe as possible. Now, I've had no communication with anybody with regard to that event or in previous events. I'd like to have, and I've asked for it yesterday, with regard to a member of the team who was part of the running of it, because I want to make sure that if anything goes wrong, everything's in place. Now, if we have to bring that on board because it's such a big thing, I don't know. But it is not, we're boxing people. As far as I'm concerned, it's not boxing. A lot of those people maybe not be good enough to get an amateur card. Certainly not good enough to get professional license. So we have to look at it in a whole world, a wider sphere than people are looking at that at the moment. And therefore, to a certain extent, as I've said before, fun is fun, but boxing is not fun. Yeah. Boxing is serious.
Very interesting words. I wanted to ask you about this. This is an unusual question. We're waiting to hear when and if Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk will meet for the undisputed heavyweight title. Would you like to see it at Wembley rather than in the Middle East? Obviously, both are being talked about, Wembley Stadium or the Middle East. Is because what's the economic impact for us having it in the UK? Does it massively benefit you and British boxing if it happens in the UK?
Well, obviously, I'd love it in London, Wembley. I think it deserves to go to Wembley. Mr. Usyk is very happy to come here. He's been very successful in Great Britain with his Olympic medals and winning world titles, etc. And I think he's very happy to come here. I think with regard to promoters, etc., it becomes a economic situation which we really don't have any benefit. But obviously, if it is here, everybody has a benefit. The shops have a benefit, the pubs have a benefit, the hotels have a benefit. So I think it would be really great if it could come to Great Britain. I think it deserves to come to Great Britain because, the boxing fans here are the best in the world. They're very knowledgeable. With all due respect to the Middle East, it's a new sport in the Middle East. Ultimately, it's a new sport. Boxing fans there maybe not know as much as we do over here. Obviously, our fans will go over because it's such a good fight, good contest. But of course, I'd like it in Great Britain. And I've spoken to Frank Warren, but he's the man who's going to make the choice where it's going to go, and that's going to be financial.
Tell me about.
And don't forget, these boys. Ultimately, these boys are coming to the end of their not to the end of their career, but they've got less of their career than they had before. So they need to make as much money as they possibly can. As they possibly can. Excuse me. As they can. So, but boxing, other than being a sport, is a business.
Just briefly. Obviously, next weekend we've got Artur Beterbiev defending 3 of his world title belts at light heavyweight against Anthony Yarde from London, in London. We've got a huge trend at the moment, even though we're talking about that fight potentially going to the Middle East, of overseas stars defending their belts in the UK. That's been a general trend now for a couple of years. What do you put it down to? Is it down to fans and stadia and all those things being very successful here?
I think it's down to promoters doing a good job. I think it's down to TV doing a good job. I think when you look around, when overseas boxers or promoters, etc., are seeing on the TV what it looks like, and the fans, they want to be here. And I would obviously say this as a sport in this country, I believe we do a good job. Not everybody will agree with that, but I think we do. On the whole, there's a few things that obviously go wrong, but still, we want to make sure that everything can happen in the best possible way. And I just think people think at the moment, boxing in Great Britain is on a high, which it should be, because this is where it started. And, ultimately, I just think that people, overseas boxers want to come and perform here, because I think the fans are a huge factor in that. You go to tonight, it's going to be fantastic. You and I have sat at shows looking around the crowd, and they're all, jumping up and down and whatever. It's fantastic. And our fans are very knowledgeable, and they know about boxing. I wish they would come to the whole show and not just see a particular boxer, which I think is a bit of a disappointment. But in my time, when you sold a ticket to somebody, they actually come to watch the whole show. Now they come to see one individual person. I hope that will change.
Obviously, like you say, there's always things you can complain about in the sport. But do you think where we are at the moment, I know we've had massive figures for some fights when it was just terrestrial TV showing it and so on, and times when we have had massive names. Do you think there's never been a better time than now?
Well, that's difficult to say, Gareth. I mean, in my youth, in the 70s and 80s, John Conti, John Stracey, Dave Boy Green, they were Jim Watt, they were fantastic times. You always think that nothing is ever as good as it was when you were young. But I think with the talent we have, and I praise the amateurs for this, because I think Robert McCracken and the amateur system has changed professional boxing for sure, because they're more professionals now than they were before. I mean, I remember when I was boxing as an amateur, and a professional boxer could not present trophies. How ridiculous is that at a show? Now we've got professional people running amateur boxing, and therefore, more than likely, the vast majority of amateur boxers who have a good record, or Olympic squad, or Commonwealth squad, or whatever, will turn professional, and that's a benefit to us. So I think that boxing at the moment in Great Britain is very good, very, very good.
3 other questions. What do we do about the Olympic Games being withheld from the Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028? What's your take on that, and what should we do about it?
I think that would be a disaster. But behind the scenes, which I don't want to go too much into, people are contacting the Olympic Committee with regard to that. I don't know too much about how the amateur world body is run, because they don't really speak to us at all. But there is communication with the Olympic organisations, and I hope that I think we will be okay, but I think it may be regulated a bit differently, which is not a bad thing. These things happen. So, but I think it would be a disaster for the sport.
2 final things. Conor Benn and Chris Eubank, obviously hugely in the news last year over the October 8th fight, which was called off, of course, in the interest of boxing after Conor Benn, certainly in the first instance, tested positive for clomiphene. Obviously, we know it's twice now that that happened, a banned PED. Where is the boxing board? Just tell me where you are with the boxing board and UKAD. We know there's an ongoing investigation and a case with that. Are we close to a decision on that? Are we close to arbitration? Because there's, you know, in the last week, there's been a lot put out by Conor Benn that he's clearing his name now, but Eddie Hearn's saying he's going to fight soon. I mean, that's very confusing for all of us out here because we haven't seen the case being ratified or any transparency out there over any of this.
Well, obviously, I can't say too much because there's a lot of legal things going on. However, the information we require, we haven't received for whatever reason. Mr. Benn's legal team have decided. We're waiting. I understand they've sent a document to the WBC. We have not seen that document. WBC do not license boxers. They just sanction championship fights. So if that's the way they want to go, it doesn't make any difference to us. We will wait to see what they say, but we will do our own investigations when we get the information we require.
Can I just ask, what information do you require?
Well, we all know, quite simply, that he has failed 2 tests. We've heard on media the reasons why. I haven't seen any documentation to say why. So let's just wait to see what comes our way.
But you've requested them and you haven't had them, yeah?
We've requested information from the beginning and we haven't had them yet.
And how long is that? Is that since last stop?
Oh, from when it started.
Really, that's very surprising. Final thing, you were accused of being the boxing board of no control on Jim White's show the other day by Simon Jordan. What's your take on that? I mean, is it you know, do you take it as light-hearted, or is it something serious when someone comes out and says that about the board?
Well, I respect Simon Jordan greatly. I listen to the show on a regular basis. However, I don't agree with everything he says. As I've said before, I listen to it on the football thing and I think, you know, when he talks about football, well, he must be right, he must be right. And then he talks about boxing, I think, well, that's not right, that's not right. So does it make, I'm not too sure whether he's right about the football, but I'm fairly sure he's more au fait with the football than he is with the boxing. He's entitled to say what he says. You know, we had 307 shows last year, 270 something the year before, and Simon keeps going on about a couple of events or three events or whatever over last year. I'm very happy to sit down with Simon face to face and Jim to talk to them about the problems we've got. We've explained the reasons why he doesn't agree with them. If he doesn't accept it, that's life. You know, I've got no problem with that. I fully respect what he says. You know, he's a fan. I fully respect what he says.
Robert, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for your time, as always.
No problem, Gareth. God bless you. Take care.